Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Lori Hammer, and I'm so excited to have you on today because we're going to talk about anxiety. And you know that I am the Calm Mom, an anxiety expert, and I have another expert on with me today. Her name is Heather Lillico. She is a nutritionist. She teaches meditation. She also has this amazing app, and you all need to go download it. It is called Cultivating Calm. It's really amazing, and I know you're going to love it. And we're going to have an amazing conversation today. So, Heather, welcome to the Take Back My Brain podcast. I'm so excited you're here.
Thanks, Lori. I'm excited to be here. I think it's going to be a good conversation. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of anxiety.
I know, because it's such an epidemic, right? I mean, over half the
Well,
population has some form of anxiety. So,
yeah, and I mean, speaking of epidemic, right? Like I've seen so many more people experience anxiety since the pandemic
oh,
that it's just
absolutely.
skyrocketed, that it's made so many people feel, that new level of unsafety and chaos. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are really feeling it. So we need some more tools in our toolbox.
Yeah, definitely. Because we have to learn how to manage because life is going to throw a bunch of stuff our way. And so we need to know one, how to eat right, two, how to manage our thoughts. We need to know who we are and what we stand for. And part of that is, squashing down that anxiety. Because if we know those things, we feel really grounded in who we are as ourselves, then anxiety doesn't creep in, right? So
Yes,
for sure.
yes, absolutely.
I would love to hear your story. Like, how did this come to be, of you becoming an anxiety, guru in the space that we have?
Oh, well, yeah, happy to share my story. So, as you gave me that lovely introduction, I am a holistic nutritionist and a yoga and meditation teacher. And I started working in this area because I wanted to help people manage anxiety naturally. And it was through my own experience with anxiety and panic attacks that I really got into this work. So,
Mm,
if I sort of backpedal a little bit, growing up, I was always kind of a nervous kid. I was always
mhm.
worrying about so many things, coming up with all the different worst case scenarios of how things could play out and wondering about the what ifs. And I was very sensitive, like any hint of criticism, and I would be in tears. I was an empath, so I could very readily pick up on the emotions of other
Yep.
people.
Yep.
And I was a perfectionist. Like I had to get top marks or I felt like a complete failure.
Boy, I think you're
And
like my twin sister
yeah.
here.
Oh, you're seeing some
I'm
similarities,
seeing some
eh?
similarities, seeing some similarities.
Yeah. And so all of that, this overthinking, this self-doubt, all of that followed me through to university. And it got to the point where I was doubting myself so much and I was feeling so much pressure, self-imposed pressure, that I started to have panic attacks. And I
Mm,
remember the first one I ever had, I was at a crowded party in university and my heart started to beat fast. My
mm.
palms got sweaty, my vision started to tunnel. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread take over. And so I locked myself in the bathroom. I remember just sliding down the wall and waiting for it to pass.
Wow.
And I thought, I feel like I'm dying. Like this feels terrible to experience. And so ever since then, I started living in fear of when is the next panic attack going to strike?
Right.
And I was getting so overwhelmed by the thought of all of this and trying to manage everything that I knew something needed to change. So I went to my doctor and I said, I'm having a lot of anxiety. What can we do?
Hmm.
She whipped out her prescription pad and she started writing me out a prescription for anti-anxiety meds. And I said, let's just pump the brakes for a second because I really don't feel like I've even explored other options. So
Right. Right.
let me see what I can do. And this is really where I began this journey to heal. And I healed the beliefs that I had about myself. And I
Mm,
put habits into place that helped me regulate and stay balanced. So I started off with my diet, and this was like, I feel like before a lot was known about it. So I just did my
right.
own research
Hmm.
and I figured out some foods that were making anxiety worse and some ones that could make it better. And so I changed my diet. I went mostly whole foods, plant-based, and I started
Okay.
to feel a lot
Hmm.
better.
Yep.
And then I still felt like my nervous system was kind of jacked up, amped up all the time. And I started practicing yoga and I felt even calmer.
Hmm.
And then I still felt like I had a million different thoughts swirling around in my mind. And so I
Right.
started practicing meditation. And that was like the last piece of the puzzle for me
Okay.
of understanding how all these things fit together and that needed to put habits into place every day that worked those pieces
Hmm.
in. And so this is what I teach others now. I teach on combining mindset, nutrition, and movement, how can we
Love it.
combine those into
Hmm.
habits in our day so that we can be more regulated, more calm, live happier and more free lives?
Right, right, absolutely. So let's go over those three fakes. So which one do you want to start with? Nutrition?
Let's start nutrition.
Let's start
Yes,
nutrition.
sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people when, they have anxiety? What's the first thing to change? Because even thinking about changing your diet can make you anxious.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming,
Yeah,
right? And I
yeah,
think first I like to sort of set the context for people that what you eat is so important in terms of your anxiety, right? Not a lot of us make that connection between what I'm eating and how I'm feeling. I mean, on some sort of level, we kind of know if I eat more veggies, I'm probably going to feel better, but there's so much tied up with food, right? There's so much judgment and shame that comes along with what we choose to eat. But I like to sort of set the context for people so they can understand like why and how are certain foods affecting anxiety and what would be some nourishing options instead. So some of the
Mhm.
foods that people might consider how they're affecting them, things like caffeine, right? If we're already anxious, we're already jacked up and our nervous system is already in that fight or flight kind of pathway, right? And when
Right.
we're consuming caffeine and consuming like a lot of it, then it's going to push that pathway even more.
So
And
do
so we
you
can
touch people's
feel,
coffee? Do you like touch their coffee?
I do, I
Yeah,
do.
I'm the bad person there too. I'm always like, you're like, please don't take my coffee away. I'm like, we're gonna have to touch it. We really are because you're anxious and stressed, and caffeine is not your friend.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it can come from it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing kind of thing, right? Because the group of people that I work with are perfectionists. And so there is that mentality of like that black or white thinking, right?
Right.
Of it's
Right.
either coffee or zero. I think like, okay, if you're having two coffees a day, could we pull it down to
But we
one? Or
would.
could we do
Hmm.
like a half decaf, half regular? Or,
Hmm.
just exploring some options. I mean, these days there's some amazing
So
alternatives on the
amazing. Yes.
market, right?
Yes.
Ones with
Hmm.
mushrooms in it that are
Yeah.
going to help provide functional benefits and more energy. Ones with
Yeah.
like dandelion root, for example, fabulous
Mhm.
alternative that's stimulating, but
Yep.
not that same jolt as caffeine. So, I
Yep.
really encourage people to just be open to trying alternatives, like
Hmm.
dip your toe in the water and still feel like you have that kind of ritual, right? I think coffee for people, it
Yeah, it brings
involves
some
that kind of
comfort.
like,
Yeah. And it's
yeah,
their yummy
yeah,
thing in the morning and they just feel, they feel good and, helps them wake up. And yeah, so there's always something going on in the brain. So I always ask my clients, I'm like, why do you need this? What does it do for you? Because then we
yeah,
can target, neurotransmitters and balance those, but then also get to the emotional root of it as well. Like, sometimes it's a memory. Sometimes it's just, they had a bad time a few times and they used that particular thing to bring down, whatever it was their comfort at the time. And yeah, so you have to get to the root of all
yeah.
of that, right?
Oh, yeah, it's so true,
Yeah.
Laura. I mean, we all, go towards these certain foods because they get a need met. So, what need
Mhm.
are we getting met by coffee?
Yep.
And can we get that need met in another way, perhaps a more hormone balancing way?
There you go. Yep.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
What else?
coffee is one that we want to consider. I think sugar as well, like processed sugar,
Yes.
right? So the
Mhm.
things that we find in like cookies and cakes and candies and all that. And again, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. There's something that I teach to my community, which is the what can I add principle. So if I'm going to have a snack of chocolate, great, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm going to ask myself, what can I add to this? So can I also add maybe a handful of nuts? Because that's going to
Mhm.
provide some protein and fat to help me feel more full and stabilize my blood sugar? Can
Right.
I also
Mhm.
add maybe a fruit to that? So it's going to provide more antioxidants, right? More
Right.
fiber. So it's not about like it's all or nothing. It's about I'm going to enjoy this snack that I really love and it's going to feel like a treat, but I'm also going to add some things that can stabilize my mood because then
Yes.
it feels more expansive, right? It's not like I can't have this and then I'm thinking about it all day long.
Right. And then you're craving, and then you're constantly in this fight. And we don't want people to be in a fight.
Yeah, exactly, right? And,
Yeah.
or, exploring some alternatives to processed sugar, like we have maple syrup, honey, agave, coconut sugar, date sugar. Any of
Yeah.
these aren't going to spike the blood sugar as much. And then you still feel like you're having something that feels like a treat, right?
Mhm.
And it's still
Yeah.
getting that need met.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what about movement?
Movement. Aha. So, what I've found is that let me set the context here. So I grew up being a figure skater and I
Okay.
would compete and I would do like intense boot camp classes to help
Yeah.
me prepare. And then
Yeah.
when I finished my figure skating career, I would do circuit training and CrossFit and like these more intense types of workouts. And what I found was that I was getting really injured doing them and I was exhausted all
Me
the
too.
time. Right? Hand up.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep,
And I thought, why am I doing this to myself? And I realized that I had this kind of association with exercise that I felt like it wasn't a quote unquote successful workout unless I was absolutely depleted and totally sore
yep,
afterwards.
yep. Yeah,
Right. And so I had to kind of retrain like what a workout means. And I realized that I'm trying to nourish my body here. I'm trying to balance my hormones, which
yep,
were in
yep.
total burnout mode. And so I started incorporating lower intensity types of movement. This is yoga, Pilates, bar classes, walking. And I
Mm-hmm.
found that I had so much more energy when I was doing them. And it was incredible to not have my body be sore all the time and
Right?
have this sort of like punishment to myself. It really changed the way that I viewed exercise and the relationship I had with my body. And it's so
Yep,
supportive for anxiety because these intense types of workouts are going to spike cortisol. That means stress hormone. And if you're
yep,
already anxious, right, we're already
yep.
struggling with the balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I always laugh when people say, "Have you ever done CrossFit?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was the worst 4 months of my life." 'Cause I couldn't sleep. Everything in my body hurt. I never got more toned. I never, all I did was feel bigger and awful.
Yeah.
And it's because it wasn't the right fit for my body. Like hormonally, for some people it can be. I have friends that do CrossFit, they do great at it, they look fabulous. That is not what happened to me. And I think a lot of it had to do with my age. And I was like, nope, I have to do this because I can. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should be doing it for your body, right?
Mhm.
And it really messed up my hormones. And I didn't sleep for like 4 months because my body was like screaming at me. And I'm like, no, I can get it. I'm going to do it because go all or nothing, go big or go home.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I got to the point where like, you know what? I don't even like going to the gym. I don't like going to the gym. I don't like working out with other people. I don't like the smell of the gym. I don't like
Hmm.
the chemicals they use. I don't like the TVs. And, I'm 42 at the time. And I'm like, I really, what do you like doing, Lori? I like to go for walks. I love walking my dogs. I walk 3 to 4 miles every day. I like doing my own home workouts. And I'm like, you're 42 years old. Why can't you do that? Yes, I
Yeah.
can. Right? Just
Yeah.
giving yourself permission to do that. And I never looked back. And I love working out. Sometimes it's more intense. Sometimes it's, just stretching and walking. It just depends on what it is.
Yeah.
I just got a rowing machine. I love, my rowing machine. It's so much fun. And I
Hmm.
don't go hog wild on it either. So
That's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah. I mean, amazing that you've been able to tune into your needs, right? And I think,
yeah.
especially as females, where we are in our cycle throughout the month,
Oh
that
yeah,
also affects workouts. And I was always expecting that I would have the same level of output throughout the month, right? And it was like, okay, even if you don't feel like doing this intense hit workout today, it's on your schedule, you're still going to show up and do it. And
right.
now I sort of plan my workouts around where I am in my cycle so that I know, okay, now's not a good time to push yourself. Now's a time to find those slower walks in nature and really
Yeah,
just
yeah.
offer yourself that grace of what does my body need right now? I think so
Yep.
many of us don't have that connection to our body and being able to meet our own needs.
Yeah, I think we've been lied to as society as a whole as women, like just keep going, 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 going. If your husband is working out this way, then you just work out that way. If your boyfriend's working out this way, you just work out that way too. And it's not served us well at all. And so, I mean, we really need to pay attention to the female cycle because it is so precious and it's beautiful. And until we can actually flow in and out of that cycle, it doesn't look precious and beautiful. It looks like a hindrance and, like a monster every single month. So, you may not always enjoy, when you start menstruating and stuff, you're like, it kind of is an inconvenience. But once you understand, how you ebb and flow, as a female, as you're talking about exercising, changing your exercise schedule, right? According to your cycle. I would love for you to get into that. So what does that kind of look like for you? I mean, you're clearly much younger than me. So, how old are you?
So 35.
35. So yeah, so you're 15 years younger than me. And so what does that look like for you? Because you're like, I'm getting to the end of my fertility. You're still like in the midst of it. So,
Mhm.
everything should be, flowing pretty good for you still.
So what that looks like is, you know, I mean, up until like probably 2 years ago, I didn't even track my cycle. I didn't ever know where I was in the cycle.
Which
And I
is crazy
never,
to think about, right?
yeah. And I
I
was
will.
like, I was never taught this. I was never taught even the fact that, my energy would change throughout the cycle
Yeah.
and that my output would change. I really wasn't taught that. So I had to, sort of do my own research and understand at the beginning of the cycle when you're menstruating of, okay, probably during the first couple days, you're going to feel a little tired, a little slow, sluggish. So it's not the time to push, but it's still the time to get some kind of movement, right? Because we know this gentle type of movement can help with cramps and some of those some of those symptoms. So that's the time at the beginning of the cycle where I'm maybe doing like some walks or perhaps like some yin or restorative yoga,
Yep.
something really gentle and encouraging to the body. And then as we come closer towards ovulation, that's a great time that you're probably going to feel like you can push a little
Like
bit.
you
So
can take
that
on the
could be,
world when you're ovulating.
yeah, yeah, like I'm just maxing out reps during that. So maybe that
Yeah.
is when you're going to do a bit of weight training. Again, doesn't have to be all out, like to the wall exhaustion kind of workout, but maybe you are doing a little bit more cardio during that time. Maybe you are lifting some heavier weights. And then after that time, and then, we start to come towards menstruation
Mhm.
again, that's when you start to taper things down a little bit
Yep.
and do
Yep.
those relaxing, restorative types of practices. But I think when we track our cycle, then we have a bit of a better understanding of like
Yeah.
how hormones are fluctuating and then what we're naturally drawn to do that during that time. Because I think if we really tune in, we are with this sort of wave, this ebb and flow, we are
Mhm.
naturally drawn to what is most
Oh, yeah.
restorative to the body. But most of us have kind of shoved down that little voice, right? And
Yeah.
just fallen prey to like, you need to do this workout with this intensity all the time and really not allowing for our individual needs.
Right. If it's on the schedule, that's what you do
Yeah.
because we live and die by the calendar.
Yes, yes, right. And especially, I mean, the people that I work with, the perfectionists, love a to-do list, right?
Yeah.
Love a
Yes.
check this off. And, the more intense, the better, because it feels like achievement is linked to worth, right? If I'm not achieving something, then I'm not worthy. And so that's sort of like a retraining that has to happen as well, and
Oh,
bringing in
yeah.
compassion for ourselves of like, what can I do today? Where am I at today? Checking in with
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like when this is me because I'm competitive. If I'm in a class, with other people, even if they're all younger than me, I'm like, I am going to beat at least some of you.
Oh my gosh,
Even
it's
if
a
it
good
doesn't
point.
serve me, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
like if you're lifting that, I'm lifting that too. So I always have
Right.
to like put myself in check, and a couple years ago I joined another, it wasn't CrossFit, what was it called? It was really fun. It was just like 7 of us women that, did it twice a week. But I even like I was so proud of myself because I'm like, no, today is not a running day. You're about to menstruate, you are not running today. And, I would go row instead, something that was a little bit easier. I could do it at my own pace. Because if I'm out running with other people, I'm going to run with other people. And I know that my brain will just do a little overdrive there.
Yeah, it's
You
such
know
a
what I
good
mean?
point.
Like you have to
Yeah.
like put yourself in check. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why for me, yoga has been such an incredible practice because at the beginning, when I was in a public class doing yoga, I would compete with other yogis,
Oh
and
yeah,
every
totally.
option that was offered to take it more advanced, I would always go there, right?
Because you're
Feeling
the
like I
advanced
needed,
person, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I needed
Yeah.
to prove something and I wanted the gold star from the instructor. And that's been a
Totally.
real lesson is to show up with where I'm at that day and know that like the more advanced yogi knows you don't always have to take the vinyasa. You
Right.
don't
And it
always
doesn't
have
mean
to
you're
take the
lazy.
option. Yeah, that's a big retraining is untangling those, feeling
Oh, so good.
lazy and your
Hmm.
worth. That's been a big part of the journey and what I teach others. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to take a step back. So we talked about, movement according to your cycle. What do you have to say about food according to your cycle?
It's a good question. So, leading up to when we're going to menstruate, that's a time where we want to up our calcium intake. We want to up our B6 intake. That's going to help with cramps. It's going to help with mood. Any of our B vitamins are really like
Right.
our mood and energy vitamins. So when we start to feel, those dips in energy, that's when we're going to want to ramp those up. So,
Mhm.
our whole grains or even like taking a B complex supplement, that can be the time for that. And
Yep.
then really watching what food we're drawn to, because for a lot of us, right before menstruating, we're going to be drawn towards like the higher sugar, higher
Hmm.
fat kind of foods. And so really leaning on some of those alternatives that maybe have like more natural forms of sugar in them, or following that what can I add principle. So great, I'm still
Yeah.
going to have the treat, but I'm also going to add in some mood supporting foods, and then focusing on magnesium as well,
Yeah.
because magnesium is very relaxing for muscles. So it's going to help with muscle contraction, if we're
Hmm.
feeling like crampy. And it's also incredible for anxiety. It's our
Oh,
calming
isn't it
mineral.
so great? Yeah.
It's incredible. And so many of us are deficient in it. So we can get that from nuts and seeds. I think seeds are probably the most underrated
Oh, yeah.
category of foods out
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah.
Pumpkin seeds, sunflower, hemp seeds. So adding those in, any point in the cycle, but I think definitely when we're starting a period, I think that's a key.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
key time to add that in. And it could be a time to supplement as well. I like the form of magnesium bisglycinate, very well
Hmm.
absorbed and
Yes.
really great for mood.
That's so great. All right. So what do we do with mindset?
Mindset. It's so big, right? It's really about the thoughts that you think, right?
Hmm.
How are we approaching anxiety? Because what I have found is that I spent so many years at war with anxiety. I spent so long saying, I don't want to feel this way. It feels uncomfortable to feel this way. I hate it. Why am I anxious? And I would just get stuck in those sort of
Yep.
that cloud of thoughts. And then what I found to be a better approach is to acknowledge that, like, okay, but I am feeling anxiety, right? It's not
Mhm.
all that I am, it's not the identity, but I'm having a feeling of anxiety right now. And when I started to understand what the anxiety was about, which for me, it was coming from a fear of not feeling good enough, feeling like I was going to disappoint somebody, feeling like I was going to fail at something, that would cause a lot of anxiety, feeling like I was going to be judged. And so when I started to understand that, that led me to feeling unsafe, right? Because if I was going to be
Mhm.
judged by somebody, if I was going to fail, if I was going to feel not good enough, that felt really unsafe to me. And so I would start to go into those sensations of anxiety.
Mhm.
And what really helped retrain that and understand it better was meditation, was
Okay.
learning how to sit with the emotions, with the thoughts, and not get so attached to them, not identify so deeply with them. And I think growing up, I never
That's a key. That's a
knew
key.
how to process. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of us, right? We don't know how to sit with these strong emotions. We just go, this is uncomfortable. I'm going to
Right.
numb out. I'm going to turn on
Hmm.
the TV. I'm going to, go face deep in a bag of chips, something. I'm going to online shop, like whatever it is, no
Yeah.
judgment behind it. But it feels so uncomfortable to sit with it and learn how to process. And that, I think, is the key to meditation, is that we're training ourselves to process it, to sit with it, and then let it kind of pass over, right? Like clouds
Yep.
in a sky, and we're not getting so attached to that identity of anxiety.
Right. And I think that's so key. I work with a lot of women as well, and to let them know that, they don't have to feel that way. Like it doesn't have to be part of who they are. But because we're so familiar with feeling that anxiety, maybe that was the environment that they grew up in. Maybe mom was anxious or dad was anxious and their whole family was anxious. And so that's a familiar place. And so you're just sort of drawn to that familiar feeling, that familiar reaction. I remember saying to a young lady one time, I'm like, sweetheart, you don't have to react this way. This isn't a normal reaction. And she just looked at me. She goes, it's not, and just coming to the realization, like, no, because you can choose to react differently, right? But not discounting what you're feeling, but not taking it to the level that sometimes I feel like we're expected to take it to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what environment you're around, like you're supposed to feel this way because this really bad thing happened, or this could be potentially happening to you. So you really should, react this way. And then when you don't react that way, sometimes that's a negative to people around you. So I think it's just, gauging a lot of, like you said, just sitting with it and like, okay, why am I feeling this way? Where is it coming from? What's the deep-seated root issue there? And, who am I really? And do I really need
Yeah.
to hold on to this? You know? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's like, a lot of the deeper roots of what's at play is these are like deeper subconscious patterns, right? That develop when we're kids and that we have these kind of beliefs about ourselves that like we're not good enough or that people are going
Mhm.
to leave or abandon us. And when those kind of patterns get activated, we start to have the familiar sensations of anxiety. So if we can understand that root for ourselves, right?
Yep.
That's causing this sort of automatic pattern to unfold, then we can really reprogram that. We can
Yeah.
retrain and say, okay, I understand this is happening. This pattern is being activated, but I am not my patterns. Like this is not how I'm going to choose to respond, right? And it feels so
Yeah.
challenging, I think, because in the moment it's so automatic, right?
Oh,
It's just A
absolutely.
happens and I
Mhm.
respond with B. I think why meditation is so great is it gives us a buffer. So it's A happens. Now I get a little bit of time to understand, do I want to go and respond with option B, or maybe I'm going to choose option C, right? Maybe I'm going to have
Right.
a bit of
Yeah.
discernment and say, okay, I understand this, this pattern's being activated, but that's not how I want to respond. So maybe I still feel the sensations of anxiety, the heart beating fast, this, the dread in the
Mhm.
body and the tight shoulders and the constriction in the throat and I still feel all that, but I can take a step back and say, okay, it's uncomfortable right now. I'm having a feeling of anxiety. I know that it'll pass. I know it's uncomfortable and I know I'm safe in this moment and kind of go through some of those affirmations.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that can help us process and release it.
Oh, absolutely. I remember well, I had a battle with the eating disorder for 12 years. And I went to an outpatient eating disorder clinic. And it's a lot of what I do right now, with my clients and balancing the brain with targeted amino acid therapy, building up the GABA and the serotonin and all those kind of things. And I remember feeling like when my brain started to kind of like come alive, and it wasn't like physically anxious anymore, like it was calming and I had those feelings, but yet, you still have that, underlying like what drove that anxiety to start with, which comes first, chicken or the egg, I don't know, but like I remember just sitting there and crying, like I don't know how to cope without having all of this, eating disorder, this anxiety, this
Yeah.
depression with me. Like, how do I cope with life? Because that was always the path that I took. And then to have your brain balanced well enough to have the opportunity to choose a different path, that was overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thanks for
But and I
mentioning that
think grieving
story.
that was really important, which I, didn't understand that's what I was doing at the time, but just crying over it, like just giving it up and saying, I don't need you, I don't want you, you don't serve me anymore.
Hmm.
It's so beautiful to be able to come to that place. And I think so many things that you're talking about are such great tools, to take people there.
Yeah. Gosh, we have so many similarities because I as well dealt with an eating disorder for so many
Okay,
years.
see, you're my twin
And
sister.
yeah, yeah, we're
Yeah.
soul sisters. And I went through that when I was, early on in my recovery, is that I had this maladaptive coping mechanism, but
Mhm.
the binging and purging was part of that. Like it helped me feel in control. It helped me feel
Yeah.
calm and it
Yeah.
helped me numb out from emotion. So when I
Yep.
took that part away, I was like, what do I do? How
What do
do
I
I
do?
cope when things are, are feeling anxious? Like, what do I turn to? And that was really where a lot of these techniques that I teach now came in because I had to learn, how can I sit with it, right? How can I think different thoughts? I had to learn, how can I move my body in a way that feels supportive instead of punishing? And how can I eat to nourish myself instead of punish myself? Like all of those
Yeah.
holistic pieces of the puzzle had to come together and help me realize, like, how can I deal with these strong and uncomfortable emotions and put habits into place that really demonstrate to myself like I'm worthy of this time for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you say to people who are like, Heather, I can't meditate. Like my mind cannot stop long enough to meditate. What do you say to them?
I say that was me when I started.
Right?
When I first started, I thought, I have a million thoughts. There is no way that I could just sit there, be with these thoughts. And I thought that meditation was about clearing your mind of thoughts. And so I would sit there and I would tell myself, okay, Heather, don't think. Don't think. Just don't think. Just sit here and don't think. Okay, you're thinking, you're doing this wrong. And then I would quit. And so it took me a long time to really understand what meditation is, and
Right.
which is why I teach others, we're not trying to clear our mind, right? The
Uh-huh.
job of your brain is to think, it's going to happen.
Right?
Instead, we're trying to sort of take a step back and notice, oh, I'm having a thought right now. Oh, I'm having an emotion right now, right? We bring in awareness and we bring in curiosity to it. Because I think a benefit of meditation is that it helps you tune into the emotions you're having and how you feel them in the body, right? Because it
Mhm.
all starts in the body.
Oh
So if we
yeah.
can understand, oh, this feeling of anxiety is coming along with a pounding heart, is coming along with
Mhm.
tingles, right? Tension, then we can understand and see this kind of like a wave. We can ride that wave and then let it go instead of gripping onto it so tight and sort of getting frustrated by it. So I think if someone is feeling like I really can't meditate, I would say change the mindset so we're approaching it with openness and curiosity. There's nothing we're trying to achieve when we meditate.
Which
We're
is
just
hard.
trying to, it's so hard as a
Yep.
recovering
Yep.
perfectionist. We're
Uh-huh.
just trying to experience it. We're trying to experience it and observe what is happening, almost like we're playing scientist a little bit. What is happening in the body? What is happening in the mind, in the thoughts? And we're just sort of taking that step back from it. And just like if you were going to the gym, in training, it's the same with the mind. We're trying to train and get stronger with our ability to come back to the present moment
Mm-hmm.
and keep that bird's eye view and just approach it with this curiosity. I really think the mindset of curiosity is the key to pushing through those first barriers of meditation.
Oh, I think that's great. And once you get past that first barrier, what would people expect to feel?
So sometimes people think that you're going to leave a meditation session and be fully calm and relaxed, and
Mhm.
sometimes that is the experience. But I will say that sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's because it is uncomfortable, right? We're trying to dive in and see what's there. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And the type of meditation that I teach is it's rooted in mindfulness about being more present, but it's also about bringing in elements of self-compassion, which for many of us we've never practiced to ourselves, right? Being kind to ourselves and saying like, "Hey, this is a moment of suffering right now." That's what anxiety is. It feels hard. Something about
Right?
this feels unsafe. And so can we just sort of honor and acknowledge this is where we're at right now instead of fighting it? So we
Mhm.
bring in that and we kind of understand that something about this situation is activating, it's triggering us. And so, we can expect that sometimes it feels like an emotional release, that it feels lighter afterwards. It feels calm, it feels open and wonderful. And sometimes it's not going to feel like that. And neither is right. It's all part of the experience, is to just understand as humans, we're meant to experience so many different emotions. We can't get attached to only feeling the positive ones.
Right. And I think, and correct me if you don't think this is true, the how your ability or your feelings after you meditate go with your cycle too.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I've never really thought about that, to be honest.
I personally feel different, I mean, you're going to feel different mood wise a little bit. You have, where you're going to take on the world. And so I think your meditation at that point in time is different when you ovulate as opposed to like right before you menstruate. You're just more like, really wanting to feel that peacefulness, the calming. You're not maybe seeking, the next thing to get accomplished, but you're like just resting, in God and let his love shine down on you instead of like, okay, what can I do next? What do you have for me kind of thing. So I think that kind of ebbs and flows too. And knowing that, just to give yourself grace, through that whole season when it's movements and your meditation and your nutrition and because it's not going to be perfect. There's no expectation there.
Right? That's such a beautiful mindset to approach it with, is we're not trying to achieve anything. There is no perfect. And what that looks like, I want people to understand that whatever experience you have is exactly the one that you needed, right? If it's hard for a reason. It's hard so that you can learn how to confront that and process it and then let it go. If it feels easy, great, bask in that, enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just hit 50 this year. So I think like this year is like the year of just kind of like letting go of a bunch of stuff for me. And,
hmm
we're talking about this and I love it, the nutrition piece and just understanding because, I'm definitely perimenopausal. And so there's, sometimes it's 100 days between my cycle and then I have a cycle and then there's like 21 days and then it's another, 96 days or whatever. So it's just kind of, ebbs and flows like that and really having to pay attention to your body and where your mind is. And you're like, why is my mind feeling this way? And trying to connect those dots. And you can't connect those dots unless you know how to get a little bit quiet within yourself, and let that process. So I love the fact that you're teaching the meditation because why is my brain feeling this way? And why can't I do a complete thought? And maybe it's because, your cycle's off and your hormones are shifting. And in 2 days, you're going to get your cycle, even though you haven't had it for 100 days. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I really think, especially as a 35-year-old, what you're teaching, and I wish somebody really would have taught me that back then, because I would have been a lot more in tune, over all these years. And I've gotten there, but I think we haven't taught our younger generations. And I think what you're doing, teaching the 20, 25-year-olds, whatever, they really need to know those things because we're taught as women to just go, 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 go. And we
Yeah,
really need to understand that our body isn't designed to do that.
absolutely. Right. We're not designed to be on 100% of the time, be on. And as women, like we fill so many different roles and there's all these competing demands for our attention. And a lot of my clients who are moms say that like they feel this sense of guilt, right, for taking time for themselves. And so we have to really reframe with that mindset work to say, how can you show up for your family is by showing up for yourself, right? You know what it's like when you are fully rested and when you take time for yourself, you
Yes.
have more patience, you want to be more present with your family, right? And you really want to like soak up this time with them. And that's so hard to do when we're stuck in cycles of overthinking and self-doubt and anxiety and perfectionism. Like we really can't be present and fully enjoy our life, I think, when we're stuck
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I just appreciate all the work that you're doing. I think your app is amazing. Tell us a little bit about your app and how that can help people.
Sure. So I developed Cultivating Calm because it's the app I wish I had. I mean,
Right?
when I was, deep in my recovery anxiety journey, I was doing this all by myself. I was trying to figure out what worked. And I feel like I kind of cracked the code of having
Mm-hmm.
these holistic pieces of the puzzle together, right? Like if you do one practice from each of those pillars every day. So you do a meditation, you work in mood boosting foods, and you do some sort of nourishing movement practice that's going to balance the hormones. That's it. That's your self-care plan. It doesn't need to take hours every day. It
Right.
doesn't need to
Right.
be complicated, but the app is really developed to help people commit to those practices for themselves and create the sense of community for people. Because for myself,
Mhm.
I found anxiety really isolating.
Yes.
I found like, I thought like, am I the only one that's feeling this way, that's not feeling good enough, that's having major
Yep.
imposter syndrome? And so
Yeah.
to have this sort of community of people who are coming together and working towards this common goal of living calmer, more free lives, I think that's really powerful. So that's really why I created Cultivating Calm.
I love it. It's so great. You're doing such a great work, Heather. Such a
Thanks,
great.
Lori. I so
Yeah.
appreciate that. I think it's been a journey to get here. And if I can use my experience of struggling for so many years, I think
Mhm.
that's, sort of why I went through all this, is because I feel like I can now share it with others and hopefully help shorten somebody else's time where
Yes.
they feel like they're really struggling with
Yeah,
anxiety.
absolutely. You don't waste anything that we've gone through. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Any final words you want to leave with my audience?
I think I would say that anxiety doesn't have to be a life sentence. That I
Amen.
don't think it has to be something that we experience for our entire lives. I think, of course, there's levels and layers of healing, but my hope for people is that they can get to a place where they're not just managing it every day, where they feel like it's another item on the to-do list. I want people to feel like they're really healing and that they can show up fully in their lives and that they can take risks and go after what they want and feel more free and present and calm, because I think that's what we all want. It's really our habits that are going to help us get there.
Yeah, I totally agree. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, her link to her app and all her social media and her website and all of her wonderful resources are going to be listed down below in the show notes. So make sure you check those out. I love to have another conversation sometime. So I would love to have you back. This would be really fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. Part two. Definitely
Part
here for
two,
it.
part two. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Take Back My Brain. Be watching in the very near future. The Calm Mom is launching a new program. So you're going to be excited. So pay attention, tune in for all those details because they are definitely coming soon. And I love all of you very much. I want you to all have a very blessed day, and I will see you in the next episode.